Once in a quiet little town in the country, there was a baker named Sam. Sam owned a small bakery on the main street, where he sold bread and cakes. Sam wasn't a very friendly man. He gave his customers only what they paid for and never a crumb more. Sam rarely smiled, but his bread was the softest and freshest anyone could imagine, and his cakes were sweet and tasty. People from all around the town came to his bakery to buy his treats. When Sam walked down the street, they could smell the warm scent of Sam's bread and cakes filling the air. Some people would walk into the bakery to buy some, but others would simply stop outside, breathing in the wonderful smell and looking through the windows. Sam did not like it when people just stood outside his shop without buying anything. "They're getting my bread's smell for free. It's like I'm giving them a meal without charging them." Sam grumbled to himself. "Maybe I could find a way to catch the smell and put it in jars to sell. Just like my bread," he thought. One chilly morning in winter, Sam was up early, kneading dough and preparing bread. He wasn't in a good mood. He complained about the cold, the early hour, and every little thing that came to mind. While working, he glanced up and saw a young man standing outside his window. The man looked hungry, and his clothes were worn and thin. He closed his eyes, smiling as he took in the fresh bread's warm smell. Sam grew angry. "The young man is enjoying a free breakfast of my bread's smell without paying. That's stealing," he muttered. Sam stomped to the door, opened it wide, and shouted, "Hey, you need to pay me." The young man looked surprised. "Pay you? For what?" he asked. "For the smell of my bread. You've been standing here taking in the delicious smell of my fresh bread," Sam replied. The young man shook his head. "I haven't taken anything. I'm only smelling the air, and air is free," he replied softly. "Not when it's filled with the smell from my shop. If you don't pay me, I'll call the police," Sam said. The young man didn't argue. Sam grabbed his coat and pulled him through the cold streets to the town's judge's house. He banged on the door until the judge, still wearing his night clothes, opened it. "What's the problem here?" the judge asked, looking tired and cold in the early morning. "This man is a thief. He stole the smell of my bread," Sam said angrily. The judge looked confused, but told them to come in and sit at a large table in his house. "All right, tell me the whole story," he said, wrapping himself in a warm robe. Sam told the judge how the young man had been stealing the smell of his bread. The young man explained that he hadn't touched anything and that he only smelled the air. The judge thought quietly for a moment, then looked at the young man. "Do you have any money on you?" he asked. The young man reached into his pocket and pulled out a few small coins. "This is all I have," he said. The judge held out his hand. "Please give me those coins," he said. The young man placed the coins in the judge's hand. The judge shook them, making them jingle and ring. "There," said the judge, looking at Sam. "The sound of these coins will pay for the smell of your bread." Sam's face turned red with anger. "But I want the coins themselves," he protested. "No," said the judge, smiling. "You wanted payment for the smell of the bread, so it's only fair that you get the sound of money. The young man may keep his coins." With that, the judge handed the coins back to the young man and told him he could leave. Sam left the judge's house feeling frustrated, and he never looked at people outside his bakery the same way again. After the incident with the judge, life continued in the little town. Though Sam the baker seemed different, though he still sold his delicious bread and cakes. He found himself thinking often about the young man and the judge's ruling. The sound of those coins echoing in the quiet room stayed with him, a reminder of something he couldn't quite grasp. One chilly afternoon, Sam was busy in his bakery when the door opened and he looked up to see the young man, the same one who had stolen the smell of his bread, standing shyly by the counter. This time the young man held a small brown bag in his hand. Sam's first thought was to scold him, but something in the young man's gaze softened his heart. He noticed how cold and tired the young man looked, his thin coat barely enough to keep out the chill. The young man stepped forward and placed the bag on the counter. "Mr. Sam," he said, his voice warm but humble, "I've brought you these nuts from the trees in my village. They're small, but they're very sweet. I picked them myself, and I thought maybe you could use them in one of your cakes." The young man's voice wavered slightly, as if unsure of how Sam might respond. Sam looked at the bag of nuts, surprised. No one had ever brought him a gift before. He opened the bag, breathed in the earthly smell, and then looked back at the young man. "Why did you bring me these?" he asked, trying to mask his surprise. The young man gave a small smile. "When I smelled your bread that day, it reminded me of home, of things that make you feel warm inside, even when it's cold outside. I thought maybe I could bring you something that makes me feel that way too," he replied. For the first time, Sam felt something tug at his heart. Here is someone who had nothing but was willing to share the little he did have. Without saying a word, Sam went to the back of the shop, grabbed a loaf of his softest, warmest bread, and returned, handing it to the young man. "Take this, it's fresh from the oven," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The young man's face lit up with gratitude, and he clutched the bread to his chest. "Thank you, Mr. Sam," he said softly, and Sam could see the emotion in his eyes. From that day forward, Sam began to feel a change in himself. He found himself smiling more, even offering a little extra to the children who came into the shop with wide eyes and empty pockets. And every time he baked a batch of bread, he thought of the young man and the simple bag of nuts. In the quiet moments, he would shake a few coins in his pocket, letting the sound remind him of the lesson he'd learned. A lesson about kindness and how joy could be found in giving as much as in receiving. And so the bakery became more than just a place for bread. It became a place where warmth was shared freely, not just from the oven, but from the heart.